My name is Celeste Marlowe, and I'm 32 years old. It should have been a night to remember, and it was, just not for the reasons I'd imagined. The private dining room at La Bernardine was drenched in golden light from the chandeliers, each crystal catching and scattering the glow like fragments of a dream. The long table was lined with white linen, polished silverware, and the faces of people who had watched my life with Daniel unfold like a glossy magazine spread. Both our families, my sister Carmen, my closest friends. The air smelled faintly of truffle butter and expensive wine, and under it all, I could hear the delicate jazz drifting in from the main dining room. Daniel rose from his seat at the head of the table, tapping his fork against his champagne glass in a way that made the room still. His smile, the same boyish grin that had charmed me 12 years ago, looked almost nostalgic. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate Celeste and my 5th wedding anniversary," he began, his voice warm, practiced. My heart swelled despite the undercurrent of strain that had colored our marriage this past year. For a heartbeat, I dared to imagine he was about to announce something beautiful, maybe the adoption we'd discussed, or even a vow renewal. His eyes found mine, and I tried to read the unspoken message there. But then his gaze slid away, toward the far corner of the room. That's when I noticed her, Lydia, his secretary, 26, honey blonde hair, perfectly styled in soft waves, the kind of curves that my own body, after years of fertility treatments, had long since abandoned. She glowed, not metaphorically, but literally, with that unmistakable, almost ethereal sheen of pregnancy. "Lydia is 7 months pregnant," Daniel announced, the words cutting through the air like a shard of glass. "And I'm the father." The sound in the room seemed to vanish. All I could hear was the slow, thick pounding of my own heart. Carmen gasped. Somewhere to my right, my mother's fork clattered onto porcelain. My fingers tightened around my glass until the stem trembled. Daniel's voice took on that reasonable, almost bored tone he used in board meetings. "I'm sorry, Celeste, but we both know this marriage hasn't been working. You can't give me what I need, what we need, a family. Lydia will be moving in with us." That was when Mrs. Grant, his mother, leaned slightly forward, her pearl earrings swaying as she spoke with a faint smirk. "Daniel's right, dear. You've had 5 years, and not even a miscarriage to show for it. We can't keep waiting for a barren woman to give us grandchildren." The word barren hit me harder than I'd expected, as though it carried not just insult, but intent, a deliberate strike. Around the table, some guests looked at me with pity, others with a curiosity that felt almost hungry. I felt my sister's hand reach for mine under the table, grounding me for just a second. But I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't throw my wine in his face, though the urge pressed against my ribs like a wild animal. Instead, I placed my napkin beside my plate with deliberate care, rose to my feet, and picked up my clutch. My heels clicked against the marble floor with a precision that felt almost ceremonial. Every eye followed me as I walked to the door without haste, without apology. From behind me came a laugh, Lydia's, soft, smug. Then Daniel's voice, low enough that it wasn't meant for everyone, but I heard it anyway. Well, that went better than I expected. The cold October air hit me as I stepped outside, slicing through the heat that had been building under my skin. I drew in a long breath, tasting the city, exhaust, night air, the faint burn of street-side roasting chestnuts. He thought he'd humiliated me. He thought this was the end of the story. But as I stood there under the city lights, my pulse finally slowing, one truth crystallized in my mind. Daniel Grant had no idea what was coming. When I first met Daniel Grant, I thought I'd stumbled into a fairy tale. I was 27, a newly minted architect at Santiago and Associates, flush with my first big project, and the kind of optimism that made me think hard work and love could fix anything. Daniel was the dashing young lawyer everyone seemed to know by name, a man who could make a waiter laugh one moment and sway a boardroom the next. We met at a charity gala, both holding glasses of champagne we didn't really like, smiling at jokes we didn't really find funny. He offered to walk me to my car, and by the time we reached it, I'd given him my number without hesitation. The whirlwind was instant. Expensive dinners, weekend trips to wine country, handwritten notes slipped into my bag before work. When he proposed a year later under a canopy of lights at the Botanical Gardens, it felt like a scene I'd stepped into rather than something happening to me. Our wedding was flawless, the kind that gets printed in local lifestyle magazines. I wore my grandmother's pearls, Daniel wore the smug grin of a man who believed he'd just won something rare. Even Mrs. Grant smiled that day, though I now remember how quickly it faded once the champagne toasts were over. We bought the Victorian on Burwood Street soon after. Its peeling paint and creaking floors didn't scare me. I saw potential, beauty waiting to be restored. The deed went into my name. A practical choice, Daniel insisted, since I had the better credit and the trust fund my grandmother had left me. He insisted we keep finances separate for tax purposes. I didn't question it. Love makes you lazy about the fine print. The first 2 years were golden. Sunday mornings in bed, dinner parties with friends, late-night planning for the family we both said we wanted. But in the third year, the questions began. Mrs. Grant would eye my stomach at family dinners like she was waiting for something to pop out. Daniel's reminders about wanting children became more frequent, more urgent. I wanted them too, maybe more than he did, but nature wasn't cooperating. By year 4, we were in and out of doctors' offices. I paid every bill, signed every consent form for treatments that left me bruised, bloated, and hopeful, only to crash into disappointment each month. Daniel grew restless. His tenderness evaporated into clipped sighs and late nights at the office. Then came Lydia, fresh out of grad school, sharp in a way that looked like naivety, but wasn't. She was assigned as Daniel's secretary. At office parties, I caught her looking at him with a certain tilt of the head, a certain laugh that lingered just a beat too long. Once, when I picked him up from work, his coat smelled faintly of floral perfume. I told myself it was nothing. Maya didn't buy it. She'd been my friend since college, the kind of person who could smell trouble before it had a shape. She'd watch me over coffee, brow furrowed, asking questions I didn't want to answer. "Celeste," she said one afternoon, "has he been different lately?" "No more than usual," I said, lying to both of us. The truth was, the man I'd married was slipping away in pieces, phone always face down. A new cologne I hadn't picked out. A sharper wardrobe, as if someone else's taste had replaced mine in his mind. And still, I clung to the story I'd built around us. The home, the history, the hope. I didn't know it then, but that clinging would make what happened at our anniversary dinner all the more brutal and all the more clarifying. The week before our anniversary, Daniel surprised me with an uncharacteristic suggestion. "La Bernardine," he said casually over breakfast, scrolling through something on his phone. "Let's go back there. Invite everyone. 5 years deserves something special." The name alone made my chest warm. La Bernardine was where we'd had our first date, when I still thought his confidence was charm rather than arrogance. I pictured a long table of smiling faces, good wine, and maybe, just maybe, Daniel holding my hand while we shared news about finally moving forward with adoption. I said yes without hesitation. The morning of the dinner, Daniel brought me coffee in bed, something he hadn't done in months. His hair was damp from an extra-long shower, his suit jacket draped over a chair instead of thrown in a heap. "You look beautiful like this," he said, leaning down to kiss my forehead. "Tonight will be special." I tucked that phrase away like a keepsake. Tonight will be special. By late afternoon, Maya was in my bedroom, curling my hair and applying mascara with a concentration that made her brows draw together. "You seem lighter today," she said finally. "Hopeful," I admitted. "Daniel and I, things might be turning around." She hesitated, mascara wand frozen midair. "Celeste, last week I saw him at the courthouse with Lydia." The name hit me like a hairline crack in glass, small but threatening. "And?" "They looked—" She trailed off, searching for a word she couldn't or wouldn't say. I forced a smile. "Not today, Maya, please." Her lips pressed into a thin line, but she finished my makeup in silence. When we walked into La Bernardine that evening, it felt like stepping into a photograph I'd seen 1,000 times. The low golden light, the soft hum of voices, the polished silver glinting under the chandeliers. Daniel's hand was warm in mine as we greeted our guests. My parents, Carmen, his colleagues, even Mrs. Grant, wearing a look of mild approval as though I'd finally done something right. We ordered wine, shared appetizers, and traded stories about our early years together. Daniel seemed relaxed, almost affectionate, leaning toward me as he gave a charming toast about commitment and the future. I felt my chest swell with something dangerously close to gratitude. Then he stood again. The clinking of his fork against the champagne glass silenced the table. "Actually," he said, glancing toward the far end of the room, "I have one more announcement." I smiled up at him, heart hammering with anticipation. That's when Lydia stood, rising from a table I hadn't even noticed in the shadows. Her hand rested protectively over a rounded belly that left no doubt about the truth. "Lydia is 7 months pregnant," Daniel said, voice steady and almost proud, "and I'm the father." The air fractured. Gasps, the scrape of a chair leg against the floor, the dull thud of my mother's fork falling onto her plate. I could see every detail. Lydia's satisfied tilt of her chin, Mrs. Grant's approving nod, the way Carmen's eyes widened with pure disbelief. Daniel's gaze locked on mine, not apologetic, but relieved. "You know I've always wanted a family, Celeste. I can't wait forever for something that's never going to happen." Something in my chest went very still. I didn't feel tears. I didn't feel heat in my face. Just a cold, spreading clarity. I rose slowly, smoothed my dress, and placed my napkin on the table. My heels clicked against the marble as I walked toward the door, each step echoing in the sudden silence. Behind me, Lydia laughed softly, and then Daniel, almost under his breath. "Well, that went better than I expected." The Victorian was dark when I pulled into the driveway. From the outside, it looked exactly as it had that morning. Crisp white trim, ivy curling along the porch rail, the soft glow of the lantern by the door. But the moment I stepped inside, the air felt different. Not quiet, but hollow, as though the walls themselves knew what had happened. The foyer smelled faintly of lilies from the vase I'd placed there 2 days ago, already wilting. My heels clicked against the hardwood as I moved deeper inside, past the staircase, past the framed photographs of vacations and holidays, frozen smiles that now looked staged, like actors playing a happy couple in a commercial. I stopped in front of our wedding portrait above the fireplace. My younger self stared back at me, radiant in a lace gown, eyes full of certainty. I barely recognized her. The silence pressed in. No muffled television from the den, no low hum of Daniel's voice on a late-night work call. Just the tick of the grandfather clock in the hall. My phone buzzed on the kitchen counter, vibrating against the marble like an impatient insect. A flood of texts scrolled across the screen. Friends, relatives, numbers I didn't recognize. I ignored them all until one came from Maya. "I'm on my way. Don't open the door for anyone but me." 20 minutes later, she was standing in my kitchen with a tub of ice cream, a bottle of tequila, and an expression that shifted from concern to disbelief the moment she saw my face. "You're not crying," she said slowly. "I'm angry," I corrected, my voice low, steady, "and I'm done pretending otherwise." She set the ice cream down, studying me as if trying to assess whether I was about to collapse or combust. "Good. Anger gets things done." I poured 2 glasses of tequila and leaned against the counter. 7 months, Maya. She's 7 months pregnant. That means he was with her before your last round of treatments," she finished for me, jaw tightening. I nodded. "While I was pumping my body full of hormones, he was taking her to dinner. While I was paying the bills, he was buying her gifts. And while I was blaming myself for everything wrong between us," I trailed off, swallowing hard, "he was building a family with her." The words didn't shatter me. They sharpened me. Maya's voice softened. "So what now?" I looked past her, through the archway into Daniel's home office, the room I'd designed for him with built-in bookshelves and perfect afternoon light. "Now?" I said, pushing off the counter. "Now I'm going to see exactly how deep this betrayal goes." Maya followed me into the office. Daniel's computer was still on. No password, because who would suspect sweet, trusting Celeste of snooping? It took less than 5 minutes. Emails, photos, hotel bookings, bank statements littered with charges for restaurants I'd never eaten at, jewelry I'd never seen. One folder was simply labeled L, filled with pictures of Lydia smiling in dresses I was certain I'd bought. And then, in the top drawer of his desk, under a neatly folded stack of golf shirts, a small jewelry box containing a delicate gold necklace, and beside it, a pregnancy test wrapped in tissue. The date on the wrapper told me everything I needed to know. Maya let out a low whistle. Wow. I took out my phone and began snapping photos. "Evidence," I said simply. By the time I was done, my hands no longer shook. My thoughts were crisp, each decision sliding neatly into place. I would not scream. I would not give him the satisfaction of chaos. I would dismantle his life with the same precision I used to design a house. I left the photos on the mantel, the flowers in the foyer, the bed made perfectly, as though nothing had changed. I packed only the essentials: personal documents, a few changes of clothes, my grandmother's jewelry, framed photos of my family. Everything else could wait. At 2 a.m., Maya and I loaded my things into her car. The night air was cold enough to bite, but it felt cleansing. As we pulled away, I looked at the house one last time. "He has no idea what's coming, does he?" Maya said. I smiled, though it didn't reach my eyes. Not even close. By morning, I was in Carmen's guest room, awake before the sun. The unfamiliar ceiling above me felt less like a stranger's space and more like neutral territory. A safe zone where Daniel's shadow couldn't quite reach. Carmen knocked softly before poking her head in. She was still in her robe, holding 2 mugs of coffee. "You didn't sleep." "I didn't need to," I said, sitting up and taking the cup. The bitter heat steadied me. While she tried to coax me into resting, my mind was already moving. Every conversation, every unexplained late night, every tiny inconsistency in the past year lined up in my head like pieces on a chessboard. I hadn't just been betrayed. I'd been underestimated. By 8 a.m., my phone showed 37 missed calls from Daniel, plus a string of texts that read like an evolution of desperation. "We need to talk. I can explain. Please call me back. This is all a misunderstanding. Celeste, I love you." I deleted them without opening a single one. Step 1. Lock down my position. I needed legal firepower, and I knew exactly who to call. "Margaret Winters," came the crisp voice on the other end when her assistant patched me through. Margaret's reputation in the city was legendary. She'd reduced senators to sobbing over asset division. "I heard about last night," she said without preamble. "Half the city has." "Then you know why I'm calling. I can see you this afternoon. Bring everything you have. Evidence, financial records, timelines." Perfect. Step 2. Financial clarity. I called my advisor, Sandra. I need a full audit of every account in my name and anything jointly held with Daniel. I want it in my inbox by noon. Sandra hesitated. "Is everything okay?" "It will be." While I waited for her report, I opened the flash drive I'd loaded the night before. Every incriminating email, every bank statement, every hotel confirmation, all neatly organized into folders. I added photographs of the necklace, the pregnancy test, and Lydia's smiling face taken straight from Daniel's desk drawer. The more I compiled, the calmer I felt. My fury was still there, but it was cooling into something sharper. Sandra's report arrived at 11:47 a.m. Every major asset, the house, the mountain vacation property, the joint savings account, was funded primarily by me. The Burwood house was entirely mine. Deed in my name, down payment from my trust fund, mortgage payments drawn from my account. Daniel hadn't been building a future with me. He'd been living in mine. At 2 p.m., I walked into Margaret Winters' downtown office with my evidence. The room was sleek and intimidating, much like the woman herself. Silver hair, sharp eyes, a navy suit tailored to perfection. "Let me see," she said, sliding a legal pad toward herself. I laid out the flash drive, the printouts, the timeline I'd written in Carmen's kitchen that morning. Margaret scanned the documents with the detached precision of a surgeon. "Well," she said after 15 minutes, "your husband has made several critical mistakes. He's used marital funds, meaning your money, to finance his affair. That's called dissipation of assets, and judges love punishing it. He's also communicated about the pregnancy during work hours, using company equipment. If his firm has an ethics clause, that could be useful." Her mouth curved into a small, predatory smile. "We can file immediately, and I have a thought about how to serve him in a way he'll never forget." By the time I left her office, the plan was set. Daniel would be served publicly at his law firm, surrounded by his colleagues. The humiliation he'd tried to orchestrate for me would be returned, but in a form that carried legal teeth. As I stepped into the late afternoon light, I realized my hands were steady. My pulse was even. I was no longer just reacting. I was building. The next morning, Margaret's investigator texted me before I'd even finished my first cup of coffee. 9:15 a.m. Lobby of Whitaker, Penn and Grant. He's there, papers in hand. I didn't respond. I just waited. 10 minutes later, another message came through, a photo. Daniel stood frozen in the marble lobby of his law firm, the morning crowd streaming around him. One hand clutched a stack of official-looking papers, the other still mid-air, like he'd been about to sip his coffee when the server caught him. His expression was priceless, the perfect blend of confusion, shock, and dawning horror. It was better than I'd pictured. By 10 a.m., my phone was buzzing with unknown numbers. I let them ring. When a call from Carmen came through, I answered. "He's here," she said, her voice low. "At your house?" "On your porch," she corrected, banging on the door like a lunatic. I was upstairs, watching from Carmen's guest room window as Daniel stood outside in his designer suit, hair perfectly combed, shouting my name. The neighbors were pretending not to look while absolutely watching. "Celeste," his voice cracked. "We can work this out. Lydia doesn't have to move in. We can figure something out." I didn't move from the window. I let Carmen handle it. She stepped out, phone in hand, and told him the police were already on their way. When the squad car rolled up, Daniel's expression shifted from pleading to embarrassed rage. The officers spoke with him for a few minutes before ushering him back toward his black sedan. He shot one last look toward the house, but I stayed behind the curtain. Margaret called an hour later. "You'll enjoy this. His partners just had a meeting. Apparently your little anniversary dinner made the rounds on social media. Not great for a firm that prides itself on family values. They've suggested he take an indefinite leave of absence." I almost laughed. "That's quick. Reputation management moves fast when money's involved." She hesitated, then added, "Also, we've had a little luck digging into his finances. He's been inflating his earnings. His actual draw from the firm is about half what he's told you." I felt a quiet satisfaction sink into my bones. The more I learned, the more obvious it became. Daniel's power had always been performance. By late afternoon, the video from the restaurant had gone viral. The grainy phone footage showed Daniel making his announcement, Lydia's glowing display, Mrs. Grant's cruel remark, and my silent, composed exit. The comment sections were brutal. Queen behavior. The audacity of that man. She's playing chess while he's playing checkers. Maya sent me screenshots with little crown emojis. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine in Carmen's kitchen and sat at the table with my laptop. Not to look at more evidence, not to check the comments, but to open the folder labeled New Firm. The sketches I'd started days ago now took on sharper lines. Homes designed for women starting over, rooms built with flexibility and independence in mind. I wasn't just ending something, I was beginning. And Daniel, he just had his first taste of the one thing he could never control, the narrative. The next morning, Margaret's voice came through the phone before I could even say hello. "Your husband," she began, crisp and efficient as ever, "is spiraling." I set my coffee down. Define spiraling. "He's called my office 6 times since 8 a.m., insisting this was a misunderstanding, that you acted rashly. His attorney is already hinting he'd like to avoid court, and—" She allowed herself a pause for dramatic effect. "His firm has placed him on administrative leave, effective immediately." I let that settle. Whitaker, Penn & Grant wasn't just his job. It was his identity. Without that polished title and the glossy conference room photos, Daniel was just Daniel. "And the best part," Margaret continued, "that video from the restaurant is everywhere. He's been memed." "I'm sorry, memed?" "Oh yes," she said, a trace of amusement in her voice. "People are making TikToks about the Lydia announcement. He's the villain in a story he can't control. His face is all over the internet, and not in a good way." I opened my laptop, and she was right. Clips of him standing at that dinner table, smug and self-assured, spliced with my silent, deliberate exit. One had over 2 million views. The comments were brutal. He fumbled the most graceful woman alive. Imagine losing your Victorian queen for an office fling. Plot twist. She's about to own half his life. The irony wasn't lost on me. Daniel had wanted to humiliate me publicly. Instead, he'd managed to humiliate himself and gift me a tidal wave of public sympathy. By early afternoon, his number flashed on my phone again. I let it ring. Then another call came, this time from an unknown number. I answered, expecting maybe a reporter. "Celeste." His voice was low, almost hoarse. "Please, can we talk?" I didn't say yes, I didn't say no. I let the silence stretch until he filled it. "I know I handled this badly," he rushed on. "We can find a way through this without dragging everything into court." "You'll need to speak with my attorney," I said finally, my voice even. "From now on, everything goes through her." "Celeste, please, don't do this. You don't understand what this will do to me." That was the moment I realized. He still thought this was about him. I ended the call without another word. Later that night, Maya sprawled on Carmen's couch beside me, scrolling through her phone. "You know," she said, "there's an entire Reddit thread dissecting your outfit from that night. People are calling it the revenge dress in real time." I laughed. genuinely laughed, for the first time in days. Good, let them talk. Because every word, every post, every shared clip was another crack in the perfect image Daniel had built around himself, and I wasn't going to lift a finger to stop it. For the next 3 days, I did something that made Daniel more frantic than any screaming match could have. Nothing. No return calls, no answering the door, no text replies, not even to acknowledge his increasingly erratic messages, each one swinging between remorse, anger, and bargaining. We can work this out. You're overreacting. Please, I made a mistake. You're ruining both our lives. I forwarded every single one to Margaret without comment. Carmen called it the Cold War treatment, and she wasn't wrong. Silence was a weapon Daniel didn't know how to defend against. He thrived on control, on pulling people into his narrative. I'd stepped completely out of frame, and it terrified him. Meanwhile, I was building something else. On Carmen's dining table sat a growing spread of sketches, notes, and clipped magazine pages. My new firm folder had expanded into a real business plan, a design company for women starting over. Homes with rooms that could adapt as needs changed. Spaces that didn't have to be justified to anyone else. Maya dropped by one evening with takeout and peered over my shoulder at a floor plan. "This is brilliant," she murmured, tracing the open kitchen concept with her fingertip. "It's like you're designing a blueprint for independence." "That's the idea," I said. "And Daniel?" I shrugged. Let him twist. Social media was doing my work for me. The viral clip from the restaurant had spawned think pieces about public betrayal etiquette and quiet dignity as a power move. People I hadn't spoken to in years were DMing me encouragement. The public had decided who the villain was, and it wasn't me. But the most telling shift was in Mrs. Grant's silence. The woman who once called me Barren hadn't so much as texted. I suspected she was busy assessing just how much of her family's reputation her son had just burned to the ground. One night, lying in Carmen's guest bed with my laptop balanced on my knees, I opened a blank document and began to type out a timeline. Not of our marriage, that was already dead, but of my next 6 months. Legal meetings, asset protection, business launch. If Daniel wanted to reach me now, he'd have to go through lawyers, public opinion, and the fortress I was building out of my own silence. And I had no intention of letting him in. 3 days after the public serving, I decided to go back to the house. Not to reconcile, not even to talk. I needed more of my things, and I wanted to see him in the space he was about to lose. His car was in the driveway when I pulled up. The porch light was on, even though it was early afternoon, casting a harsh yellow over the front door. He opened it before I could knock, like he'd been waiting. "Celeste, I'm just here for my belongings," I said, brushing past him into the foyer. The house felt wrong. The air was heavier, stale, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. I could smell his cologne lingering too strongly, like he'd over-applied it. He followed me up the stairs. "It wasn't supposed to happen like that. I wanted to tell you privately." "When?" I turned, one hand on the banister. "After the baby was born? After you married her? When exactly did you think you'd slide this into conversation, Daniel?" His mouth opened, then closed. "You have to understand." "No," I cut in. "You have to understand. You lied to me for 7 months. You spent my money on her. You let me believe our problems were my fault while you built a life with someone else." His jaw tightened. "It's still our house." "Actually," I said, enjoying the flicker of panic in his eyes, "it's not. The deed's in my name. The mortgage is in my name. The down payment came from my trust fund. You've been a tenant with privileges." The color drained from his face. "You can't be serious." "Oh, I'm serious. And you'll be moved out by the weekend." I stepped into my bedroom, pulling open drawers, gathering clothes and documents. He stood in the doorway, trying to collect himself. "Celeste, I made mistakes. I can fix this. I'll end things with Lydia. We can—" "No," I said flatly. "You don't get to decide what happens now. I do. And the only thing I want from you is a clean signature on the settlement papers." His voice hardened. "You're making a mistake. You'll regret this." I zipped my suitcase and turned to face him fully. "I regret one thing, Daniel, not leaving you sooner." And with that, I walked past him, down the stairs, and out the door. 2 days after I walked out of the house, Margaret called, with the kind of satisfaction you could hear even through a phone line. "His attorney reached out," she said. "Daniel's ready to talk settlement, and he's already more generous than I expected at this stage." "How generous?" I asked. "Full responsibility for the dissipated assets, no claim to the house, and a very reasonable spousal support figure. He wants this resolved before it gets uglier. I almost laughed. It's already ugly. Margaret's tone sharpened. Yes, but he's starting to understand how much uglier it can get. By uglier, she meant his reputation. The clip from La Bernardine was still circulating online, now stitched into videos where people recited Mrs. Grant's Barren comment like it was a villain's monologue in a soap opera. Reporters were sniffing around for follow-up stories. Someone had even dug up old photos of Daniel at charity events, comparing them to recent shots of him looking stressed and worn. And then there was Mrs. Grant. She'd stopped ignoring the situation and started controlling it. My source, also known as Carmen's hairdresser, who happened to do Mrs. Grant's weekly blowouts, told us she'd been making discreet calls to distance the family from the scandal. Translation: she was cutting Daniel off from the family trust until he restored the Grant name. Without that safety net, his carefully crafted lifestyle was shrinking fast. The leave of absence from his firm meant no income beyond whatever was left in his personal accounts, and those accounts had been hemorrhaging for months. Meanwhile, Lydia was pressing for marriage. Apparently, she'd believed Daniel's promises about a ring and a house and the life of a lawyer's wife. Now, with his income halved and his public image tanked, the fairy tale was looking more like a foreclosure notice. Margaret called it the perfect storm. I called it justice. While his world contracted, mine was expanding. Maya and I spent hours at Carmen's dining table refining the business plan. She'd officially come on board as my partner. Her interior design skills meshed perfectly with my architectural work. Our target clients: women starting over, divorced mothers, widows, single professionals ready to claim a space of their own. This isn't just a company, Maya said one night, flipping through my sketches. It's a middle finger with a floor plan. I grinned. Exactly. Daniel had tried to make me smaller, weaker, easier to replace. Instead, he'd given me the blueprint for something bigger than either of us had ever imagined. By the following week, I was ready to move my plans out of Carmen's dining room and into the real world. I booked a meeting with Richard Santiago, my old boss at Santiago and Associates. We'd worked together for years, and though he was a demanding perfectionist, he'd always respected my vision. If anyone could understand what I was building, it was him. When I walked into his corner office, the view of the skyline behind him, he stood and gave me a searching look. Celeste, you look different. Different good? I asked, setting my portfolio on his desk. He smiled faintly. Different strong. I took a deep breath. I'm leaving the firm. His brows lifted, but I pressed on before he could speak. Not to compete, to collaborate. I spread the portfolio open, revealing sketches, market analysis, and the kind of mood boards you could almost step into. I'm starting a firm that designs homes for women starting over, women like me, divorced, widowed, newly independent. Spaces that reflect who they are now, not who they were told to be. Richard flipped through the pages, lingering on one rendering. A 2-bedroom home with a flexible layout that could be an office one year, a nursery the next. It's niche, he said, risky. It's necessary, I countered, and I'm not doing it alone. Right on cue, Maya stepped in from the hallway, portfolio in hand. Maya Rowan, interior design. I'll be her partner. We'll handle the interiors and architecture together, one vision from foundation to finish. For the next hour, we walked him through our concept. Homes built around adaptability, safety, and beauty. Designs that anticipated change instead of resisting it. We already have 3 clients lined up, I told him. Women who reached out after seeing the video from the restaurant. They want what we're offering. And here's where you come in. We want to partner with Santiago and Associates. Refer projects that fit our niche, and we'll bring you clients who need your scale. Richard sat back, fingers steepled, studying us. Finally, he nodded. You've got something here, and you clearly have the fire to make it work. I'll give you my answer by the end of the week. When we left his office, Maya grinned at me in the elevator. He's in. I can feel it. I smiled back, the elevator doors reflecting 2 women who'd just stepped into a future of their own making. 2 days later, Margaret called with the kind of news that sounded like a champagne cork popping over the phone. He's caving, she said without preamble. Full restitution for the dissipated assets, no claim on the house, generous spousal support for 2 years, and, this will make you smile, he's covering your legal fees in full. I leaned back in Carmen's kitchen chair, letting it wash over me. That's everything we wanted. Everything and more, Margaret said. His attorney practically begged me to draft the agreement immediately. Apparently, Daniel is desperate to finalize this before his mother sees the full financials. She's already livid about the PR disaster. Finding out how much of your money he burned on Lydia might just kill his access to the family trust entirely. I almost laughed. Mrs. Grant, the woman who had once looked me in the eye and called me Barren, now pulling the purse strings on her son's future. Margaret's voice dropped into a tone I recognized, the one she used when she was delivering the coup de grace. And there's this. Lydia's pressing for marriage. But between his reduced income and public image, she's realizing that her fairy tale is more fixer-upper than dream home. The image that conjured was almost too perfect. That evening, Maya arrived with a bottle of Prosecco and 2 glasses. "To the clean break," she said, raising hers. I clinked mine against hers. To never looking back. In truth, it felt less like revenge and more like excavation, clearing out the rubble so I could start building something new. Daniel was no longer my problem, my responsibility, or my shadow. As we sipped, Maya flipped through the sketches spread across Carmen's dining table. "You realize," she said, "this whole thing started with him trying to embarrass you in front of a room full of people." "And now?" I asked. "Now you're about to own the narrative, the house, and your future," she said with a grin. "That's not just a win, Celeste. That's art." I smiled, the kind that settled deep in your chest and stayed there. The papers would be signed within the week. The legal ties would be cut. And for the first time in years, my life would belong entirely to me. The backyard didn't look anything like it had when Daniel and I bought the house. Gone was the patchy lawn and the oversized grill he'd insisted on, for when we host big family barbecues, he'd said. In its place was a slate patio strung with warm Edison lights, clusters of comfortable seating, and a small garden I'd designed myself. It was elegant but relaxed, meant for conversation, not performance. On this warm spring evening, it was full of people, clients, friends, colleagues, even my parents, who were laughing with Carmen near the wine table. It had been 1 year since I'd signed the divorce papers and just over 10 months since Renovate and Reclaim officially launched. We had designed homes for 47 women in that time, 47 stories of resilience, reinvention, and the quiet, stubborn courage it takes to start over. Maya tapped her glass, drawing the chatter down to a gentle hush. "When Celeste came to me with this idea," she began, "she was sitting at Carmen's dining table, nursing a broken marriage and an even bigger broken trust. But she wasn't talking about revenge. She was talking about building, literally and figuratively." The crowd smiled, and I felt heat creep into my cheeks. "She wanted to create spaces where women could be themselves without compromise," Maya continued, "where independence wasn't a consolation prize but a design principle. And tonight we're celebrating not just the homes we've built, but the lives that have been rebuilt inside them." Glasses lifted all around. I raised mine too, though I couldn't quite speak just yet. As the noise swelled again, I slipped toward the edge of the patio, looking out over what used to be a yard. I'd imagined filling with children's birthday parties. That vision didn't hurt anymore. It just didn't fit. This space now reflected who I was, open, adaptable, full of light. Maya found me a moment later. "You okay?" she asked softly. I smiled. Better than okay. Because this was the life I'd built, not for show, not for approval, but because it was exactly what I wanted, and it was mine. The call came on an otherwise ordinary Tuesday afternoon. I almost didn't answer when I saw the name flash across my phone, Mrs. Grant. My thumb hovered over decline, but curiosity, and maybe a little instinct for unfinished business, won out. "Celeste," she said, her voice smaller than I'd ever heard it, "I hope you don't mind me calling." "I do," I said honestly, "but go ahead." There was a pause, the faint sound of her clearing her throat. "I wanted to apologize for what I said that night, and for what I didn't see." I sat back in my chair, stunned. Mrs. Grant apologizing was something I'd put in the same category as pigs flying. "I raised Daniel to believe he was entitled to whatever he wanted," she continued. "I thought if he just had a son, a legacy, everything else would sort itself out. I was wrong." "What changed your mind?" I asked, my tone even. "Watching him these past 2 years," she said. "He's not happy. Lydia's baby is beautiful, but he's bitter, restless, always complaining that life isn't what he thought it would be. He asks about you sometimes." I didn't take the bait. "And?" I tell him you've moved on, that you're doing well, that you were too good for him. The last words came haltingly, as if each one had to be pried from somewhere deep. For a moment, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not satisfaction, not triumph, but pity. I wish him well, I said finally, but that part of my life is over. A long silence stretched before she spoke again. I'm sorry it took me so long to understand. And I am sorry for the things I said to you. After we hung up, I sat with the quiet for a while. It wasn't absolution. She couldn't undo what she'd done, just as Daniel couldn't. But it was something. Not for them, for me. It happened on a night I least expected. 3 years after the anniversary dinner, Maya and I were hosting an exhibition at the Contemporary Arts Center, Spaces of Transformation. Photographs, models, and stories of the homes we'd designed filled the gallery, each one a testament to resilience and reinvention. The place buzzed with conversation, glasses clinking under soft lighting. I was wearing a midnight blue dress I'd designed myself, the kind that felt like armor and silk all at once. I moved easily among clients, journalists, and colleagues, talking about floor plans and the way light changes a room's mood. That's when I saw him. Daniel stood near the back of the gallery, studying a large photograph of my house, the Victorian we'd once shared, now entirely transformed. The kitchen was bright and open, the living room a warm blend of modern lines and personal touches. There was nothing left of him in those walls. He looked older, a little heavier. His suit was decent, but the tailoring lacked the sharpness it once had. He caught my eye and raised a tentative hand. I nodded politely and turned back to the conversation I was having. Later, as guests began to leave, he approached. "Celeste," he said, almost cautiously, "congratulations. This is incredible." "Thank you," I replied. For a moment he said nothing, just glanced around the gallery. Then, "I see it now, what I did, what I threw away." I met his gaze without flinching. "I hope that realization does something for you." He hesitated, then shook his head. "It's not what I thought it would be. Lydia, the marriage, the life, none of it feels right. She's not—" He stopped himself. "She's not me," I finished for him. "And I'm not the woman I was when we were married. People change, Daniel. Sometimes into who they were meant to be all along." He looked at me for a long moment. "You're happy." "I'm fulfilled," I corrected. "I do work that matters to me, with people I care about, in a life I designed for myself. Yes, I'm happy." His voice dropped. "Losing you was the biggest mistake of my life." I didn't feel the flicker of old pain I'd expected, just peace. "You didn't lose me. You chose something else. And that choice put us both exactly where we're meant to be." I stepped aside as Maya came to join me. "Ready to go celebrate?" she asked, then glanced at Daniel with a polite but final smile. As we walked out into the night, the cool air on my skin, Maya asked, "How do you feel seeing him again?" "Free," I said simply. And I was. Free from the weight of his approval, free from the woman who once would have taken him back, free from the shadow of a life that was never truly mine. The door was closed now, not slammed in anger, but locked in certainty, and I would never open it again.